Panel number 1, and this will be moderated by Dr. Carla Smith, Deputy CEO of the Urban Resource Institute, and it is entitled Flexible Funding as a Vital Anti-Violence Tool, Coercive Control Embedded in Our Systems. Thank you. Would you like to stand for this? Or is that okay? Awesome.
It does. So while we are transitioning and celebrating and acknowledging Dr. Lewis sharing her words and her journey with us, I do want to acknowledge that I too am an 80s baby and love this side of the room as much as Dr. Lewis does. I was at an event, I know we're going to jump into the panel, but I was at an event last night with some colleagues talking about one of our programs at a community board meeting, and Dr. Lewis's sharing her journey reminded me of something that one of my colleagues said last night, and I think it's appropriate now. So I do want to say thank you, Dr. Lewis, for sharing your journey and for setting the stage for today's conversation, reminding us why we're here, why we do this work. My colleague said something last night. She said, "You are I, and I will say we are you." So I just want to say thank you. It means a great deal to this organization to have you as a presenter, sharing your story with us along the way. So I want to thank our panel. We're really excited about this. As mentioned, I'm Dr. Carla Smith. I'm the Deputy CEO of Urban Resource Institute, and really excited to be kicking off this day-long series of panels that we have. Really excited to have some experts on our panel that are going to be talking to us about economic empowerment, economic justice, and coercive debt. I'm going to move this. I do need this, Dr. Lewis. So bear with me one second. I think I'm at the, just reorganizing. Apologies. So when one thinks about gender-based violence, most people don't automatically consider the financial impacts that has on survivors. The fact is that coercive financial control is nearly universal experience for 99% of survivors that experience gender-based violence. The vast majority of survivors also cite it among the reasons they either return to an abusive situation or stay in a dangerous situation. So that financial impact on their lives is significant. This past year, for those of you who do not know, URI was part of a coalition that was successful in advocating for the passage of Introduction 148. Which for the first time includes economic abuse in the city's definition of domestic violence. This is a major achievement. And on the state level, we introduced legislation to create a mechanism for survivors to discharge a debt that was coerced. Something else we're looking forward to.
Yes, that's excellent.
Yeah, cheer it up, cheer it up. Despite how pervasive economic abuse is, there are no real legal protections on the books. Not only are there few laws on the books, but the way that our system administers financial or other supports to survivors often mirrors the experience of coercive financial control in the context of their abusive relationship. So the systems that are put in place to support can also mirror the same type of abusive situation that they were in prior to leaving. Today, we're going to discuss responses to individual and systematic methods of coercive financial control and hopefully begin developing a plan to implement these responses. And to do that, we have a dynamic group of individuals who are sitting before you who have been at the forefront of these efforts, participating in the discussion that we're going to have today. I'm going to introduce them. Teal Inzunza is our program director for URI's Economic Empowerment Program. Tiffany James is the director of URI's Crime Victim Services Program. Karen Ford, the first executive director of the Mayor's Office of New York City Nonprofit Services. Laura Russell is the director of the Family DV Unit at the Legal Aid Society. And Andy Morrison, rounding out the panel, deputy director of the New Economy Project. Thank you all for your work and joining us today. I'm going to pose a series of questions for the panelists that are designed to spark a lively discussion. We only have an hour, which is tight given the number of panelists that we have. So if you have any questions, we have placed on your tables some cards, note cards for you to actually write down questions, to add your name, your email address, a way for we to contact you. We will be collecting those questions and responding to those questions after the panel. Or later on. You can also email blueprint@urinyc.org with any questions or comments. Again, blueprint@urinyc.org with any questions. Okay? And we'll repeat that email later on as you go through other panels. So panelists, I'm going to direct these questions to a particular panelist, but anyone should feel free to respond. We're going to start with Teal. So I think it's important, Teal, that we begin this conversation with a shared understanding of what we mean when we talk about economic justice. How does it relate to coercive financial control at the individual and systems level? Can you help provide us with that shared understanding?
Thank you, Carla. Good morning. I think it's still morning. So I know that the term economic justice is often a new one for folks, and it's often a new one in the domestic violence space. But the way I like to think about economic justice is if we closed our eyes and envisioned a world, our city, our state, as a place where no one experienced the violence of poverty, where every single individual and family had access to safe and stable housing, to food, to education, to meaningful work, and could ultimately live the life that they choose. And obviously we're not there yet as a city or a state, but those of us who are deeply committed to the economic justice work believe that we can get there. And I think that's what we're going to talk about today. So on an interpersonal level or on a relationship level, the way in which coercive financial control plays out is often what we refer to as economic abuse. And that is defined as behaviors or tactics that are systematically used to control an individual's ability to acquire, use, or maintain economic resources. So, this is a very serious issue, and we've heard already that finances can really restrict a person's ability to live their life fully. So, when it comes to domestic violence or intimate partner violence, we often think of this happening very overtly, like somebody is forcing you physically to do something, or it can look really, specific. When we're thinking about coercion, that looks a little different, and it may look different from the external than it does on the internal. And so when I work with survivors, I've learned to ask them the question, did you feel like you couldn't say no? And I think that really gets to the nature of what coercive control is. It may look like a survivor saying yes, but there's a whole bunch of things happening behind the scenes, like actual or perceived threats to themselves, their children, their family, their pets, their friends, that lead a person to saying yes when they would not have otherwise done so. And I think it's important to state that consent is not possible when coercion is present. So this ends up in the economic justice space as what we refer to as coerced debt, ultimately. And coerced debt is non-consensual debt. We just talked about consent. But essentially, it's when a partner or a family member, forces somebody to take on debt that they would not have otherwise done. So I'll give you an example because I know that's kind of hard to understand. Often when I work with survivors, they are, their partner who has caused harm has forced them to open a credit card in their name, run up a bunch of debt on that credit card, and then, saddled them with this debt. In the state of New York, that is almost impossible to get rid of. And that can sit with a survivor for years and sometimes decades and really impact their ability to get housing, impact their ability to move forward. We currently, as Carla mentioned, have a bill at the state level that would make New York the 4th state to pass coerced debt legislation. So we're really hopeful that that passes because this is something that impacts more survivors than I think we even know about, and is something that is pervasive. On the systems level, when folks are in need of financial assistance, we think about our public benefit systems and the way that those work. Clients experience and survivors experience the system saying, if you need money, you have to behave in this way. You have to do these certain things, or we won't give you money to feed your family or yourself. We won't give you money to have housing. This is inherently coercive and is something that we need to think about when we're thinking about how we distribute funds. And people who need money, and all of us do, because we live in this world, we could do this in a different way, and we'd like to envision how we could provide direct financial assistance to survivors and anyone needing assistance in a way that's not coercive.
Thank you, Teal, for that clear framing of the issue. I know we're going to move on to talk about some more questions and follow up. And as I said, if there are questions for any of the panelists as we move forward, please write them down. We'll make sure that each panelist gets questions. Tiffany, Teal spoke a lot about coercive financial control, both from an individual perspective and a systems perspective, as she just did. In your work with crime victims and at the Justice Center, can you provide families with access to financial resources and support? Can you discuss some of the obstacles that you are seeing that your clients are facing in administering and receiving the use of that funding?
Absolutely. So half of my team is funded by the Office of Victim Services. So we are able to put in financial claims for those who are innocent victims of crime, which is great in the grand scheme of things. However, to determine the eligibility of these clients, there are so many other things that we have to understand. Like, for example, a large part of our clientele, they're undocumented. So there's already that fear of reporting that I don't want to go to the police. I don't want to have to say anything for fear that my harming party is going to brutalize me or victimize me even more. So we have that. We have those who have experienced police brutality. So they're not even seeing any kind of criminal justice agency. They don't want to be near it. Even when we offer some sort of accompaniment or some sort of support, they do not want to press charges. They don't even want to touch that. So they're already someone that we can't really assist to the best of our abilities. We have those who have police reports that are written in a way that kind of makes them seem like the perpetrator as well as the victim in the same report. So when we have to provide proof of their victimization, they already have something against them. The other part is when we do submit these applications, there's a long time for them to have to get some sort of response. We're talking months. Majority of the clients that we see, they're in shelters. And so when we put in the claim for them, and we assess eligibility and they're great, everything goes well, now we're waiting 3 months, 4 months, and since COVID, it's been even worse. And so by the time we get back to them with either an approval or a denial, they've probably transitioned out of the shelter and we can't contact them. Or if they are, and we're coming to them and saying, hey, your claim's been denied, they don't want to hear that. It's further discouraging to them. Yes, we can go through an appeal process, but now this is another 30 days or 45 days that they're waiting. And So these are the hurdles that we're trying to overcome in our positions as case managers, but it's hard. Now, one part of this is also that for those who are undocumented and we, that they do experience, they can put in claims, but again, they don't want to go to the police. So how do we support people who have all right and all access to funding when we can't do that? We're putting them in a position where they're not going to be able to get something that they do truly deserve. So one of the solutions is if the governor would be able to pass a particular bill where it's fair access to victim compensation. It does two things. It addresses the reporting requirements. So instead of it being, why did you report your victimization between 7 days, 14 days, 30 days? And let's pause there for a second. If you are a victim of sexual assault, you're not even thinking about all of the resources that are available to you. You're just trying to process your trauma. So me as your case manager, I'm coming in and I'm trying to provide resources to you and asking you, hey, so why didn't you report within this short time frame? Of course, we're going to get kickback already, and it's just going to be a blank stare, and we can't even move forward. So this addresses the reporting requirement, and also it addresses us being able to move past having to report to a criminal justice agency and instead have a victim service provider like URI, where victims are already and survivors are already receiving services, and we can now vouch for their victimization. And we can say, hey, this is what this person is going through. These are the services we are providing. They should be able to get the access to the financial compensation that they not only need, but that they deserve.
Thank you, Tiffany. Definitely helpful to hear sort of the reinforcement on the legislative support that we need in order to serve people where they are at the time that they need to be served. I'm going to shift over to Laura. Laura, you have been representing clients on related issues for some time. Can you tell us a little bit about what it looks like to represent a client who's experienced an economic abuse? We talked a little bit about the coerced debt bill as well. Are there other policy changes that we could make that would benefit people who have experienced economic abuse?
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. So at the Legal Aid Society, we believe in a holistic approach, which is what's needed when you're working with clients who have suffered economic abuse, domestic violence, and coerced debt and coerced control. Therefore, we have our family law unit specializes in divorces, contested divorces, so that when they are separating from their spouse, they don't lose the rights to retirement benefits or child support or alimony, which New York calls maintenance. We have a consumer attorney who specializes in domestic violence survivors, so she works with our clients to look at their credit reports so that if they are in shelter, they could get housing. Because as we all know, credit reports, whether they should or shouldn't be, are looked at for survivors of domestic violence when they are obtaining housing. We have a tax attorney because many, many times coerced debt also takes the shape of filing improper taxes or forged tax returns. We have a bankruptcy attorney because at times that is the best option. There's just too much debt and that's all our clients can handle. All of these people and my unit work together so that the client can get the financial resources that they need. The problem is that there's just not enough funding for all these people. I mean, there are 6 to 7 consumer attorneys in New York City to represent everyone. And then of those 6 to 7, only a small amount specialize in representing domestic violence survivors. There are maybe 2 bankruptcy attorneys. There are probably about 13 of us who do heavily contested divorces in the entire city of New York. And when funding is available, many funders, unfortunately, robustly fund things like an order of protection and custody or visitation, or barely robustly, but will not fund anything financial. Their attitude is, well, your client should just be on public assistance and then they'll be able to be okay. And that's not the right answer. I mean, we have clients who do not and should not give up the financial pieces of their marriage or the child support or the maintenance, and yet they are forced to because funders are like, well, they have their order of protection, they're safe. That's the beginning of the case. That is not the end of the case. Also, these cases are more complex. So a funding cycle is 2 years, a divorce cycle is 4 years. What happens? The funders, the way the funding is set up, and we all know this, it's not set up for longer, complex cases. It's set up for short, little, minute things. The courts are very slow these days. COVID has made it much worse. There also have been some policy decisions, some good and some bad, and I know Teal mentioned a few of the good ones. The New York City Council passed a right to counsel for domestic violence survivors in divorces. Hold your applause, they have not funded it. For 2 years, they have not funded it. They have not funded a pilot project. They have funded nothing. So yes, it's amazing that it's on the books, but no one can access it because there's no funding for it. The coercive control bill is still in our legislature. It's not, well, hopefully it'll move in January. We'll go with that. And yes, we did add domestic violence to we did add economic abuse to the definition of domestic violence, which truly helps our clients in so many ways. And I know URI and Teal and I and many others in this room were very, very effective in getting that done. There is a support survivors bill that passed that gives paid leave for domestic violence survivors. And so there are things that are happening, but there are also things that need to happen. And what we really need to do for our clients is to focus on the fact that getting an order of protection and getting them into shelter is not the last step, it's the first step. And then after that, it's getting them adequate housing, getting them into a situation where they can take care of their children if they have them, and getting them into a situation where the abuser is actually paying what they're required to pay under the law, and that they have attorneys to get that done.
Thank you, Laura. So we are going to shift a little bit to talk about, we've talked about, you all have been speaking about sort of what resources our survivors need, and we're going to shift to talk a little bit about what resources and support organizations like URI and those in the room need in order to be able to support those survivors. And who better to talk about that than Karen from the mayor's office in your new position as executive director. There are a few people in government, working in government right now, who have the benefit of your perspective and experience. When you were at Help USA, I am sure you encountered some of the same issues that we are talking about, the administrative burdens, onerous reporting requirements and timelines, and the restrictions on funding that nonprofits like URI and others face, as well as our clients in accessing that funding. We know the city has already made a commitment to address this, your role and your new portion of the government, to address many of these issues. How can we best work together to streamline the process and ensure that families in crisis are getting the kinds of support they need when they need it?
Great, thank you, and good morning to everyone. I want to just first thank URI and thank you, Carla, for convening this very important meeting and very important discussion. Also, I just need to bring greetings on behalf of our mayor, Mayor Adams. Also bring you greetings on behalf of First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright, and also greetings on behalf of Deputy Mayor Anna Almanzar, who is in my direct reporting responsibility. And I'm really having a wonderful moment. I want to acknowledge Council Member Farah Lewis, because she's the reason why this office exists. So thank you for bringing this bill to legislation. So first of all, this office is, again, I'm an inaugural executive director, very proud to be here. And like you said, Carla, stepped into this position because I do have a heart and experience for our nonprofit partners. One of the areas for me in this role is to really begin to take a look at a huge paradigm shift that's necessary and that has to happen. I'm quite sure a lot of you read the article in New York media, right, by John McIntosh around the history of contracting and the history of procurement and, you know, how we got here and why we are here today in terms of the structures, the systems, the bureaucracy, and a lot of it was not really built in favor and in support, right? It was a reactionary response to bad actors, right, and to systems and change. So one of the key things for me and goal in this office, which is my responsibility, is to amplify your voice, right, in City Hall and to the mayor, right? But one of the things I need to do first is work on changing the way that our partners in city government, right, see our nonprofits. You are an extension of government. And a lot of time we step into, and I keep saying we, because it's only 10 months, right, that I was on that other side with you. And although I've moved in and out of government my entire career, my heart has always been in the nonprofit sector in my experience. So I say that we, because we are in partnership. And that's that's actually the tagline for my office, which is to strengthen partnerships that's in community and in service to our communities. So if this office, right, can begin to change the paradigm on how city agencies first see our partnership and see nonprofits as an extension of partnership, that's one of the first things that we need to do. Because I think that every decision is a judgment, right? Every decision, every action, every time someone makes a decision about a policy, around funding, around who gets what, it's a judgment decision. You are determining who gets what and how it should be delivered, and who determines that. And that comes from a particular thought and a mindset on how you see that work and how you see that partnership. So that's one of the very first things that I'm really looking forward to doing in partnership with the team. The other area for me is that you guys know that the Joint Task Force was convened, right? We talked about, you know, how we got here. At the end of the de Blasio administration, again, with the legislation that City Council brought into pass, at the beginning of the Adams administration, there was the convening of the Joint Task Force to get nonprofits paid, all of the recommendations that came out of it. And are there any folks that were in this room that participated in that Joint Task Force? Nat, were you guys were in there? Thank you for those recommendations, because when I received that blueprint, that also made me say yes to this role, because I felt like they got it right? You guys were heard, right? All of the recommendations were taken into consideration, and the city, was like, okay, now we're in the implementation and execution phase of what those recommendations look like. We know that we have a lot of work to do, right? But there was work that has already been started, and work that there is a huge commitment to getting this done from this administration, and also from the perspective of my office, and from me, right? And from the team that I'm building and putting together. I just also want to go back to, thank you for URI with your purpose-driven organization, with your key pillars of hope and intentionality. And that's the thing that drives the work, that the lens in which I'm moving towards the changes. Right, so we want to talk a little bit about what has already been done. There's a huge commitment. We know that there was a backlog that was inherited coming out of COVID. There was $7 billion worth of outstanding payments to nonprofits that this administration inherited. It's criminal. Like, in what business, in what partnership do you ever see that someone's going to front you $7 billion? Right? So the administration made a commitment under the guidance of First Deputy Mayor Sheena Wright and launched the task force. And they showed that in 4 months, they got $4.2 billion out the door to you guys, right? And paid you for the work that was already done. To date, right, we've already released about $6 billion of that money, right, back to that you had already. And then there's a commitment to never, ever, ever ensure that there's another backlog like that again. And the way that we're doing that is the Mayor's Office of Contracts, and I also want to bring you greetings on who I call my partner in crime, and that's Director Lisa Flores, right, in the Mayor's Office of Contracts, and we work lockstep. I work directly with and in support with her team, is to make sure that the timely registration of contracts and timely registration. I'm not a contracting person. I'm not a procurement guru. I am a macro level social worker. I am trained to take a look at intervention points and convening and facilitating in ways that we can continue to move the conversation forward. So we are committed to timely registration, right? Making sure that we get contracts out the door to you in a timely way. Timely on the books means 30 days, right? We know that in average, there was a study done by First Deputy Mayor. We looked at a timeline, and this is around our discretionary rewards, right? That it took over 365 days in order to get a contract registered. It's just ridiculous, right? I'm preaching to the choir here because I know that you guys are on the receiving end of those things. So making sure that we register your contracts in a timely way so that you can get your advances, right, in a timely way. There was also the commitment to allowance amendments, right? Making sure that that 25% in your contract is there, it's already included in the budget, so that when we get to places like your indirect cost rate, right, that we are, as an administration, committed to making sure that the city agencies honor your approved indirect cost rates. And if that's not happening, please reach out to Director Flores. Please reach out to myself so that we can work with the Office of Budget Management and Budget to make sure that that approved indirect cost rate is honored and utilized by the different city agencies. So that's also another commitment from the administration as well. We want to talk about going back to the timeliness registration of contracts. 98% of the contracts have been registered to date in this administration. That is up, and again, that's because of the commitment from the Mayor's Office of Contracts in making sure and project managing and working with every city agency to make sure that the contracts are moving forward. And I've already been hearing from some of you guys, maybe in this room and maybe not, that things are opening up and getting just a little bit better on that end. The other area for us, again, is moving in the ongoing iteration of the reform work, right? So there's a lot of work that's happening behind the scenes to make sure that we take a look at all of the contracting and procurement decisions, right? The rules, the delegation authorities, the auditing. We're committed to the city council discretionary area. That's a whole particular body of work that my office is working in partnership with the Mayor's Office of Contract to facilitate and to kind of get through and take a look at what reforms that we are able to provide some relief to. How many of you guys saw the information come out about the multi-year discretionary reform? Yes? Oh, boy, Matt, we got to work on we got to get the communication going out to you guys. So in partnership with City Council, with the Comptroller, with City Hall, and with the Mayor's Office of Contracts, we were able to get approved a multi-year contracting vehicle and mechanism for discretionary. You guys know already how painful. When I was at HELP, Ronnie Silverman was like, Karen, we're not even going to apply for that kind of money because it takes so long to get such little bit of amounts of money through to the nonprofits that definitely deserve it. And so with this new reform that we were able to pass, again, in partnership with City Council, means that those and City Council still has the right to say yes or no, right? And to the funding, providers still have to apply for the funding and get it approved. But what we found was that 65% of the time, City Council awarded the same amount, the same money to the same organizations, right? So that means it's like a TSA pre-check for discretionary. That's the best way that I could describe it, and that's not my term. I got it from one of my colleagues, right? Is that you kind of jump to the front of the line. The Mayor's Office of Contracts is able to front load your award already, and you bypass about 4 to 5 months of time in order to get the funds released. That's when City Council says yes, and when that funding, if it already exists. So there's a lot, again, of work that has been done that we are nowhere near at the place where we could kind of hang our hats and say, you know what, we've arrived. I just got here, and I told my team that this work is going to be iterative, and it's going to look different every time we complete something, and we're committed to going back to the table, making sure, and then more importantly, creating a space for you to hear your voice. I have an advisory council that's coming up, and the appointments should be going out soon. I'm looking to make that announcement in November, and that's about 25 different nonprofits that are going to come to the table, representing across sector, across size, across different areas. There's 4,400 nonprofits in New York City, right? So that was a feat within itself of trying to kind of come up with what that first step of the advisory council is going to look like. But that's going to be your voice, right? Your voice, whoever it is that's going to represent this particular sector in that space is going to have say-so in how we shape policy, right? What we put forth for the mayor, and also, more importantly, for the different reforms that we're going to work on. So, we're looking at also, there was an announcement around the vendor integrity unit, right? It's like we're solving for a couple of things, because if we create the mechanism to work at and to support struggling nonprofits, because I'm a social worker, so I come from the place that everybody really comes into this work to do a good job, right? Not to get over on government, right? Not to, and every now and then you have bad actors, right? And you have situations, and you have nonprofits that struggle in their back office systems. Again, I'm a former COO, so I'm an operations person for me, and everything rises and sets on the structure, right? And your fiscal, your ability to manage, right, and to be fiscally sound as an organization. So we created a vendor integrity unit, right, within the Mayor's Office of Contracts that's really going to work with the city agencies to handle nonprofits that may get themselves into some challenges, right? So, you don't want to, and I worked for Samaritan Daytop Village in the drug treatment world, and they have a saying, Peter pays for Paul. Like, we don't want to do that. We don't need Peter to pay for Paul's mistake, right? Let Paul's mistake be an isolated situation, right? Where we're able to handle that, and then really take a look at it, whether or not it requires a policy or practice change, but not a broad spread. Working with the Department of Homeless Services, my former boss is here, so I got to be careful what I say. Jocelyn Carter. But we were in a time where we had situations with nonprofits, and I know that some of those decisions that, based on the IGA report, that they're still serving, because I hear, from the nonprofits, on what the decision was made to kind of penalize the whole system, right, based on about 3 or 4 nonprofits that had challenges. You know, so we're keeping all of those things in mind. What else I want to talk about? Yeah, I think that's it. You know, I'm excited. Thank you. I'm excited to be here. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to really, you know, anyone who knows me knows that I'm not a performative manager. You know, I really am going to lean into the space to see some tangible change. It's going to take time. It's going to be painful, right? Because it's going to cost us, you know, have us take a look at areas and look at things that, you know, we may not have looked at before. There is a commitment from the administration to not just do the easy stuff, right? You can get your low-hanging fruit, which is what I think we did in the first iteration of the reform work, but now we have to kind of drill down a little bit more and get a lot more into the weeds to begin to understand, you know, what changes that we can particularly make. And then one of the other things, and the last thing I want to talk about, is just highlighting the fact that there was a financial commitment. I need you guys to know, right, and hear that the administration is with you in support of understanding and knowing that how valuable our workforce is, the nonprofit workforce, that the workforce is an extension of city government, and that there is a commitment to figuring out a way on how we can get to a place where we know that the staff that you work for, the staff where I started my first job as a residential aide in a shelter, right? Understanding how important it is to make sure that they have a viable living wage, that they're there is a commitment. There is a commitment to hearing and figuring that out. We all know that we're in a fiscal crisis, right? You know, I do have the 15% peg is real. Like my 9 positions dwindled down to 7, right? So that's real, but we are committed. You know, my administration, my leadership said, Karen, we're going to continue the conversations. We are going to have those conversations. We're going to figure out what that looks like and how we get there. I don't have that answer now. And maybe next year when we come back again, I will have that answer and I will be in a better place to be able to show you that. But right now, there was in the FY24 adopted budget, the $40 million increase to $90 million in FY25 in new funding support for the sector, right? And again, that comes also on top of the $68 million that I think was committed in FY23. But I know, trust me, I know it's a drop in the bucket, right? But we'll get there. We'll get there and in time, and I just need a little bit of patience from you guys, okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. It's so nice to have someone in city government with a nonprofit lens, understanding that we are not just service providers, but businesses that need resources in order to be able to serve the clients that we're serving in the way that the city and our organizations are committed to doing. So we have enjoyed being at the table with you all, and we'll continue to do that work as we move forward as partners. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Andy, let's move over to you. So the New Economy Project has a very specific views about what economic justice looks like. In the context of survivors and families experiencing homelessness, can you share some of those ideas with us?
Sure, and thank you first of all for inviting us to participate in this excellent panel and event today. It's really a privilege and great to be here. So New Economy Project is an economic justice organization based here in New York City. Our mission is to build an economy that works for all, based on social and racial justice, cooperation, neighborhood equity, and ecological sustainability. We achieve our mission through coalition organizing, policy and legal advocacy, community education, and other strategies. So this morning I want to start by just telling you a little bit about our legal advocacy work. We operate the New York City Financial Justice Hotline, which is a free legal hotline for low-income New Yorkers who are experiencing abusive debt collection, predatory lending, credit reporting issues, and other financial injustices. And I just want to pause and encourage everyone to check out the hotline and refer people to it. It's free for low-income New Yorkers, and we have a great team of attorneys there to support people who are experiencing these kinds of really difficult issues. And the website is fjhotline.nyc. So on the hotline, we hear from survivors of domestic violence experiencing coerced debt and identity theft and other forms of economic abuse that you've been hearing about on this panel. So for example, we recently received a call from a woman who left an abusive relationship and entered a homeless shelter. Her credit had been damaged by the abusive partner who had taken out a car loan in her name. This is very common, as I'm sure a lot of you know, and so she is going out looking for housing, and she can't find a landlord who will rent an apartment to her because her credit is damaged. And Teal talked about this. This happens a lot. It blocks people from housing. And I want to be clear about something, that a person's credit has no bearing on their fitness for tenancy in an apartment. So through aggressive marketing, the credit reporting industry has succeeded in equating creditworthiness with character. And they've found ever more lucrative applications for the use of credit reporting. So we've seen it in employment, as I said, as we talked about in housing, in insurance, and it just unjustly blocks people from economic opportunities and basic necessities. So the way we think about credit reports is that they merely reflect existing inequities that exist in our financial system and economy, which means that they often serve as a proxy for race. So everybody knows this. If you look across New York City, there are whole swaths of communities of color that do not have bank branches, where banks are not making responsible, affordable loans. And so people are in the clutches of high-cost, fringe financial services companies that extract wealth from those communities and destabilize them. So that's why several years ago we organized with groups and we got the city to ban the use of credit in employment decisions, which was a big problem. But we need to do that in housing too. So when survivors call us, they're often on the financial brink, and it doesn't take much for everything to unravel. And the vast majority of people who call us live in these redlined communities, Black, brown, and immigrant neighborhoods, where the debt that they're incurring is often on predatory terms. So not only are survivors in these communities being coerced into debt, which is bad enough, but the kind of debt they're being shackled with is egregious and costly. So for example, we see a lot of car loans at 24.99% APR for a secured debt, a car loan. And why is it 24.99%? Because the usury cap in New York State is 25%. So they're getting every single penny they can squeeze out of people. And that's because our financial system is designed to extract wealth from people and communities. Another call we recently received was from a survivor who kept getting summonses for parking tickets that the abusive partner had racked up. And every time she had to go to court, she's facing an incredulous judge and being re-traumatized by the experience. And we know this, and we're talking about it this morning. Survivors are forced to interact with systems that are racially biased, onerous, difficult to navigate, and then result in re-traumatization. So the policy reforms that we're talking about are so sorely needed to give people better options to navigate the collateral consequences of domestic violence. But I want to underscore, no one should bear the burden of having to credential themselves out of these unjust systems, especially when doing so aggravates the very problems that the reforms are put in place to address and ameliorate. So what we need to do is reimagine, dismantle, and replace these unjust systems. And that's what we do a lot of work at New Economy Project, focusing on transforming our financial system and economy so that everyone, especially those facing hardship and trauma, are not having to confront like these compounding inequities and broken systems. So I wanted to share a little bit about what we're doing. It's exciting, it's timely, and it's really practical. So the idea is that instead of institutions that are premised on excluding people from wealth building opportunities and in fact extracting wealth from them, we want to create new institutions that exist to build wealth in communities, particularly in Black, brown, and immigrant and low-income neighborhoods across the city. And that will help us address the root causes of housing insecurity, homelessness, and economic inequality. So these community-led economic development initiatives are popping up across the city. It's an incredible moment, and it's a time where we should be supporting these initiatives. So we're working, for example, with groups across the city, and actually in every borough, to create community land trusts. So these are called CLTs. They're community organized nonprofits that steward land and housing for the public good. So this gives community members and residents the opportunity to democratically decide what kind of development they want in their communities. And it enables them to keep the housing in those communities permanently affordable. And that'll help obviously address housing and homelessness and stem gentrification and displacement. We're also working with worker-owned businesses or worker cooperatives to strengthen these vital institutions. When workers own together their businesses and make decisions in their shared interest, they have greater control of working conditions. They can have better pay and generate generational wealth building opportunities for them and their families. And I just want to say Teal authored a great report that I have with me, Reinvesting in Economic Justice, Equity, and Solidarity for Survivors in New York City, that I encourage folks to check out. We're also supporting the growth of community development credit unions, which are community-owned institutions that exist to serve these redlined communities with responsible financial services and to invest in and strengthen these communities. And that'll produce good jobs, permanently affordable housing, and equitable financial services. And then finally, just want to share a little bit about our campaign for public banking. So a public bank would be operated by the city. It would hold the city's deposits and then be able to reinvest in a huge way in these kinds of local economic development initiatives. So the idea is to make public money work for the public good. The reality is right now, the billions of dollars that the city collects in revenue are placed on deposit with big banks. More than 80% of our deposits are with JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, and Citibank. Now, these are the same banks that are redlining communities. So why do we want our money going to these banks? Let's put it in our own institution that can capture the investment potential and then reinvest and drive local economic development. So a recent New School report projected the kind of benefits we could see from such an institution. And just in the first 5 years, it would add 70,000 jobs, would create 20,000 new or rehabilitated units of affordable housing, invest in climate solutions, and drive $6 billion in new lending to redlined neighborhoods. So there are opportunities right now to make these things a reality. There's legislation before the City Council, a package of bills called the Community Land Act that would really usher in community land trusts around the city, and then another package of bills called the People's Bank Act that would move us toward a public banking option for the city's deposits. It's a really exciting time. You can learn more about these bills on our website, which is neweconomynyc.org. So thank you so much again for the opportunity to share this morning.
So I want to thank Andy and all of the panelists for today. And these conversations, as you know, started well before today's session and will continue long after today's session. As we mentioned before, questions can be added on the cards that you have at your table, and we will pick those up. You can also email, again, blueprint@urinyc.org, questions and comments, and we'll get back to you. This was an incredible conversation, discussing some of the ways that we can work together to improve the systems for our clients, current clients and future clients, and those that will be reaching out to us as nonprofit organizations. So thank you for your expertise, all your work, and of course to URI for giving us the opportunity to come together and talk about this. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.